The first thing is, tell me what your coaching situation is. Do you have no coach? Do you have some adult? Yeah.
They're more like travel agents instead of coaches. They book tournaments, but they don't teach anything.
Okay. Yep.
Okay, so our coach really enjoys CX and talks to them a lot, but also kind of acts like we're the stepchildren and doesn't ever talk to us about anything and stuff like that. So it's basically like we don't have a coach, but he's kind of there and doesn't actually do anything.
You want to sign us up for tournament?
Yeah.
Okay. So neglected stepchildren. Yep.
For 2 years, I had a coach who's actually a preacher, and this year he quit, so I don't have anyone right now.
Okay. So like no adult whatsoever?
Not really.
Okay. Do other people have similar situations? Yeah.
We have like a school coach, and then there's a few who help me out, like prepping for tournaments. But I'm might have to figure out how to go to like circuit tournaments without my school coach next year.
Okay.
Because he can't do that.
Okay. Great. So it sounds like people have not necessarily similar experiences, but similar issues with coaching. And so what I want to do is take you through a few things that you should do if you don't have a coach. And some of these are sort of how to build your team. Others are, we can talk about some of the logistics of how you can get to tournaments and things you need to know if you are doing all the registration yourself. So, and Mrs. Meelan is not epileptic, and she will be here momentarily. She's just stuck in traffic right now, if she's driving here. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is team building. How many of you, just by show of hands, have other people on your team? Okay, so just about everyone does. And the other people on your team, would you say that they're sort of younger than you, or are you kind of a team leader for them? Yeah. Okay, somewhat. All right, so I think the first thing you need to do when just trying to operate without a coach there is to get in charge of recruiting and team building. So the first thing I'd say is to really be effective, you need a minimum number of kids on your team. I would say that should be about 3, but you want what I call a core 4. If you have 4 people on your team, or more than that, it's going to make prep, it's going to make prepping, it's going to make all the other things you have to do much easier. Very, very, very difficult to do it all on your own. If you can do more than that, that's even better. So a few things I would recommend. One is try to hold interest meetings at your school. And you can do this in a couple of different ways. I recommend that you schedule some at the end of a high school year. So kind of towards the end, as people are getting ready to leave, it's good to at least make them aware of what debate is, see if you can get people to join that way. But another thing I recommend is if there are middle schools in your district, definitely work on building a middle school program. This is really critical because you want to try to get people who haven't yet been in high school to start so they can be there for all 4 years. The main thing you need to do with the people who are currently on your team is you need to get testimonials. What that means is you need people on your team to recruit directly. They should be getting maybe family friends, they should be getting friends of theirs, and you want them to join because if your team is a sizable number, it automatically makes it likelier that your school is going to help fund you. And if your school doesn't, other organizations like the NSDA can help do that. So, how do you get people to join? Just very briefly. First thing is play up the team element. Talk about how they will make friends, talk about how they'll be connected, talk about how it's a group that functions very well, even if that's not true. Basically, tell them that it's a social network, because that's the major thing that kids want to do when you're trying to get them to join. The other thing you should do is mention travel, even if your team doesn't travel, or it doesn't travel much, because the idea of debating on a college campus, or the idea of going to different parts of the country, is very appealing to people. And finally, you should probably mention or play up or focus on the idea that debate makes school easier. The thing that my kids always say when they're trying to get people to join is, oh, I now can write essays in like half an hour where it used to take me 5 hours, which is probably true. If they hear that, they're very likely to at least be somewhat interested. And the other thing, one more thing, is show them your trophies. People are motivated extrinsically. They're motivated when you show them a reward and you say, you can get this. So that's what I recommend just as a preliminary point, is you want to try to make sure that you get people to join. The other thing, just in terms of team building, and this now starts to get into what you need to do if your coach doesn't know what's going on, which is unfortunate but tends to happen a lot, is novice curriculum writing. So you need to be like the best teacher to these people possible, and so there are a few things that you need to do when you don't have a team. The most important thing is build up your novices. How did some of you get novices? First of all, how many novices did you all have on your team last year? What are some of the numbers? Yeah.
I'm curious, can I say how many we're getting next year?
Sure.
When are you talking about 9 or 8?
9 or 8. You guys are saying 0?
It's just us.
Oh.
We are literally our team.
All right. You got to get 2 more people. You got to get 2 more. Yeah.
Our team went from 2 people to 26 people.
Wow. That's very effective marketing.
But it's also an issue with like teaching people and running practice.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll talk about that in a second. Does someone else have a comment?
Oh, like, we're all at the school, but about 6.
Okay.
6 to 8.
Okay. So that's a good number. The reason you want to get novices is just because that will again help you get funding. So what do you do with them? First thing you need to do is teach them argument structure. Teach them claim, warrant, impact. Because once you do that, and like you can tell them things like, you'll never lose an argument to your parents again. Once you do that, it's something that's not really difficult to grasp, and yet it makes them feel like they have knowledge about something. And that's kind of the main thing in getting people to stay in debate, is not so much like, do they get, what AF gets RBIs means, but instead, do they get the fundamentals? You also need to make sure that right off the bat, you teach them the speech times. What I used to tell people, although it's not as effective anymore because now people don't have to memorize phone numbers, we have cell phones, but I used to tell them that it's like getting somebody's phone number and having to memorize it. This is really important as well because it's a very simple piece of knowledge, right, the speech times in the debate round, and yet once they know it, again, they feel like they know something. And a couple of other things that I would teach them right off the bat when you don't have a coach there is how to dissect a simple AC. So take them through a case that is very straightforward. If it's one of yours, edit it down and try to make it as basic as possible, and annotate and list out each part of the case with them. So show them something that you've run, break it down for them, explain what each part is. That is good because it shows them what they're expected to do. And also with that, give them a template for case writing. So what I mean by that is provide a fill-in-the-blank outline. All their cases are going to look the same initially, which is fine. The main point is you got to make sure that they have some idea of what a case is. A lot of people, when they first start debate, really don't understand what it is. They think it's like a presidential debate where we're at a podium in front of a big audience and I get up and I do my little, moment in the sunshine, and you get up and you do your moment. And they need to understand that it's very structured. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a problem with because our coaches just really they never
Absolutely.
redid that ever.
And totally understandable. What you need to do, yeah, that's the thing. Like, you wouldn't take, an infant and drop it in the ocean and be like, sink or swim, right? Like, it's probably a bad idea. So you have got to intervene if your coach is doing stuff like that. And we're going to talk a little later about how to deal with difficult coaches who think you're undermining their authority when you try to help the kids out, because that's a big deal as well. Yeah, don't let that happen under any circumstances. Don't let them compete if they don't know what they're doing, because that's exactly what's going to happen. Most of them are just going to quit right off the bat. So, with that, I would say once you've kind of taken them through a case, when you're about to teach them the sort of logistical elements of debate, you have to teach them flowing. And the first thing that I would do is give them a non-debate note-taking activity. For example, have them flow, quote unquote, the lyrics of a song, or, so I'll put a few here, song lyrics, or some people use a deck of cards where they just read off, each card, so they're like 7 of hearts or whatever, and etc. You can also use the news, like a news program or radio program where you can have them try to take notes on it. But the point is, you don't want to throw them right into the debate elements itself. You want them to sort of ease into it based on things that they know. The second thing that I would recommend with this is that you use one of 2 methods when you teach them how to flow, regardless of how you personally do it. So one is either a 2-page method, where you just have it as simple as possible, which is just like an app page and a neg page. Another thing you can do is what's called inward flowing. I don't want to get into like all the logistics of that, but basically this is where you start the flow with the AC all the way on the left side, and you do the NC, the case part, all the way on the right side. And I'll show you an example of what this looks like actually. I have one right here, because this is actually how I flow. So I've got the app case over here. I've got the neg case, just the case over here. I have the neg answers to the app case in this column. I have the 1AR answers to the neg case in this column, 1AR defense of the AC here, 2 NRs here, and the 2AR is over here. It's supposed to be more in the middle. Didn't totally work out that way, but that's one way that I teach novices how to flow, and that's actually how I do it. And I find that it helps them isolate the different parts of the round. If that is confusing, or if you're not sure you get it, then just teach them the more basic way. But they need to know how to flow, because that's probably the most important thing when you're learning debate for how to do. In addition to that, I would say give them a series of flowing symbols. Give them a sheet that has all the symbols you use on it, because they need to start to learn how to do that. So the major things you're doing when you're introducing debate to them, just kind of as a overall statement, is you're not throwing a lot of technical jargon at them. You're just teaching them how to do the basic things like flowing, and then you're introducing them to argument structure. One final thing I would mention for this element is focus on the fun elements of debate. So what I mean by that is make them think it's just an extension of things they already know how to do. If you walk in with a group of novices and you're like, here are 50 terms you need to know, and you need to know them by tomorrow, and here is like meta-ethics, and here is critiques, they're not going to want to do it, right? They want to think that it's just like debating people the way they do in real life. So to do that, you should have them do what are called spar debates. This is where you have them debate topics they know something about in an informal setting. Right, so for example, I don't know, the death penalty, or abortion, although that could get kind of dicey, or, drug legalization, a topic that they might have an opinion on. Because if you can get them to just do a little, informal debating, it's going to make them think that actual high school debate is similar to that, even though we all know it's not really. Okay, so that's kind of the part on novices. Are there any questions about that element before I move forward? Okay, so let's keep going. Let's talk about logistics. Yeah.
How do you go about enforcing your novices to do this? Because a lot of times our coaches will I actually proposed last year, but one time tried to actually learn something, and my coaches were just like, "What are you doing?" So how do you kind of enforce I guess you guys actually do graded stuff or?
So we don't have debate as a class, and so everything we do with debate is after school. And I can talk about the logistics of that actually a little bit later, how we run practices. When I was in high school, I had a coach. I was sort of in a similar position to some of the people who've already spoken. I had a coach who was all about policy debate, and he was really, really good policy debate coach. But he didn't necessarily have the same level of enthusiasm at that time for LD. And so one of the things that I had to start doing was just running my own practices with the kids who were doing LD. And at first he was a little bit not totally okay with it, but eventually he was just it's fine, whatever. So if they don't want you to do it, you just need to first explain to them why you want to do it, and if they still don't want it, you might have to do things that are not happening on campus. So you might have to do practices at people's houses, or in a library, or somewhere else where they can't say no. Okay, so let's move into logistics. And Ms. Leland, I sent you the outline, I think, from what we did last year.
Yeah.
Okay, so first thing is you must get parents involved, because parents can either be your worst enemy or your best friends. You want them to be your best friends.
Yes, please.
So what I would say is you need to try to organize a meeting with the parents of all the kids who are on your team. And what you need to tell them, and the big thing you need to know about that is parents really want face-to-face contact. They want to know who the other kids on the team are. They want to know who the other parents are. They want to know the coach, although sometimes the coach is hiding. So they want you to approach them directly. Don't do it through email. Don't do it through any other means. And what you need
They did not grow up in the same time you did, right? So text messages and emails are not their mode of communication.
Yeah, at all. So you need to emphasize a few things when you talk to them. First is the importance of traveling. A lot of parents don't understand that tournaments differ from region to region, or one part of the country to the next. So to a lot of parents, a tournament like Green Hill, which is an Octus TOC bid, is no different than the local tournament down the street held on Saturday, right? They don't see the difference. So you have to explain to them how these things are different and why it's important that kids get the opportunity to compete at the national level. The other thing is you need to emphasize the need for parent judges and chaperones, because a lot of parents just don't want to get involved. They just kind of don't want to have to do anything with debate. And it's very important that you explain to them the need for them to judge and to learn what debate is, so that you can cover your entries at tournaments.
Do y'all know how expensive it is to go to a debate tournament? Who wants to tell me? Who wants to just give me an example? someone to judge for you, right? Because if you don't, then you've got to pay the tournament what they're going to pay someone to judge for you, which could be another $150, $200. Some tournaments will just go, oops, sorry, can't come if you don't have a judge. So the point is, financially, it behooves you to get someone on your side who will come with you to tournaments, because otherwise the parents are going to foot the bill in a different way, right? If they can't give the time, then they're going to have to pay the fees. And when they start to understand it that way, they become a lot more willing to come spend time with you than they were before. Additionally, it's kind of nice when parents know what their kids are doing. Debate is like a foreign language to a lot of people. So if you can articulate the value of debate to your parents and get them to articulate it to your friends' parents, then you start to get a little network of people who can share responsibility. So your mom doesn't have to do it all the time, right?
And it's good also to formally have like something where parents take turns judging or chaperoning, because that way they also feel like they're connected to other people. The other thing that I would add is communicate all the time with parents. The parents on your team are actually the #1 resource for you. So what we do is we have a team Facebook page where every time we go to a tournament, we take a photo at the end with the kids and their awards. We post an update on our Facebook page. We're posting, like now that we're at camp, here are all the kids at camp. And what that does is it gets all the parents and the family, friends, and the relatives to go to the page and look at the photos and like it. And it's good because then they're like the parents are sharing their links, and it builds amongst the parents a prestige factor. So they're like, my kid just won this tournament, and look at this photo.
Yeah, and it's all about making it part of their community, right? So if it's on their social media, not to contradict what I just said about your parents don't know how to text, which obviously your parents know how to text, but if it's on their social media, it becomes part of their daily everything that they're doing. It's integrated really nicely into their life. One of the things that we've done is we've started, similar to the Facebook page, we've started a team Twitter account. This was actually kind of a brilliant move, I think, on the part of my husband, because parents would call him and be like, how the kids doing? How the kids doing? How the kids doing? How the kids doing? Like every parent that had a kid at the tournament. And so finally he was like, why don't I just create a Twitter account where I can post like so-and-so advancing to octos, right? So that he didn't get like 10 calls all the time. But it really is nice because that way they can elect to check the Twitter account or not. We're not bothering them, and they're not bothering us as much anymore.
And it's good for to actually appoint someone on your team to do that, because Danny's dad kept emailing me being like, how's he doing? I was like, he's going into the final round of QSC. So here are some other non-parent related logistical issues. Big thing is get the team budget information, if at all possible. Now this might be difficult because it might be like information that can't be shared with students or whatever, depending on how your school bureaucracy works. But it's very important that you have an idea of what the budget is, because if it's a low budget, which many local programs are, you need to initiate fundraising. So you've got to do some things, whether it's bake sales, or whether it's car washes, or whatever it is. You have to get that money independently. Sometimes you're lucky and you have like businesses in your area who are going to be willing to give to the team if they know about it. Very important that you have money, because money and parents are the two key things in building a team.
Absolutely. And be creative about your fundraising. Especially in Texas, the fast food chain Sonic, they're usually very, very willing to do what's called a Sonic night, where the debate team would work as the people who deliver the food to the cars, right? And you get to keep all the tips and a proceed of everything that's sold that month. That's an excellent fundraiser, and all you have to do is take a Tuesday out of your schedule and say, all of us are going to go work for 3 hours. Other restaurants, this has sort of become a theme, other restaurants are increasingly willing to allow you to host a night, and anyone who says that their table is with the debate team, a proceed of their sales will go to, or a portion of their sales will go to you. So I think those are kind of cool fundraisers that I wouldn't have thought about until about 5 years ago.
Yeah, and also with that, I think it's good to, once you have an idea of how much money you have, to then set a tournament calendar. And this is something that has to be based on your budget, but you need to have some idea of either how much you think you can raise through the types of fundraisers that Ms. Newland was just talking about, or how much you already have. Try to get parent support, as we mentioned earlier, for travel tournaments or bigger tournaments, because if parents are putting pressure on your school administration to let you travel, it's much likelier that that's going to happen. School districts tend to be terrified of parents, and so when parents are saying, this is what we want, this is how we want it done, and they're doing it as a group, they can help make that happen, whereas if it's just you, it's much more difficult. Also, let's talk about some registration logistics. So, how many of you have personally used tavern.com or Joy of Tournaments? Okay, a pretty decent number, that's good. So, do you all, those of you who just raised your hands, do you do your tournament registration? No and yes. Okay. If you do it, that's wonderful, because that means that you have complete control over that situation. If you don't do it, that can be tricky because your coach might not know what's going on. So first thing is you need to know all the registration deadlines. So for example, and we talked about this in the MJP lecture last night, Greenhill, Bronx, and Yale have an August 1st registration deadline. So if you're not the person who does the registration, you gotta tell your coach that ASAP, like right after this is done, email your coach or text your coach or call them and tell them that August 1st is the deadline for those tournaments.
And this is sort of a unique situation, that August 1st deadline, but I will tell you that my husband and I make a joke every year that all of our debate friends across the country, even if they're not night owls, are staying up late that night, and they are registering at midnight. And we like set an alarm for like 11:55 to get the computer out, get it turned on, because these tournaments fill up extremely fast. Like it sounds like I'm exaggerating, but I am really not. One time we actually had a party at our house where we invited a whole bunch of coaches over, and we all waited till midnight and we registered for tournaments because we're that lame. And also, it was kind of funny, but that is a deadline that you cannot mess around with. Some of the other tournaments, you can mess around with their deadlines a little bit, but these, especially Greenhill and Bronx, you will be out of luck.
I was out of the country last year, and I had somebody else register for me because I didn't want to miss it. So it's very serious. If you miss that deadline, you will not compete at the tournament. Also, I'll say with that, in the Northeast, which I know you're there, and some of the other people here, you're all on the same team, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. So for you guys, the tournaments will fill up very quickly, like usually within the day. So if your coach isn't doing it, you need to constantly remind them, or here's a better idea, if they'll let you do it, let them give you access to the registration account. What I would do is just be super nice about it. So I'd be like, oh, let me take this off your hands. Like sort of make it sound like you're doing part of their job for them. Don't make it sound like you don't think they're competent, even though that may be the case. Because if you can do it, then it's not a problem. You just need control over that.
One thing, and I'm sure Mr. Hertzing emphasized this before I arrived, but one thing that is important if you're in that situation where you have someone who proclaims themselves your coach, that they are not very good at doing things that coaches should do, is you've got to be politely assertive. So you have to, and this is important, because the moment that they see you as just one of those kids in their hair like Mr. Wilson on, what was that show? Where the kid was the brat. Okay, anyway, I can't remember. Dennis the Menace. Y'all know what I'm talking about. So he's this old man, and he goes, Dennis! The moment that they see you as Dennis, it's done. It's over. And you can't even reverse that perception. Once you are Dennis the Menace, you are just going to have a hard rest of your life in debate. So you've got to be very, very nice about it, but you've got to emphasize that there are things that have to be done. And sometimes they think that they're doing them to the capacity that they should be done, and that's where you're going to run into some issues. The whole time, as long as you are approaching it from the way that Mr. Herzig says, where it's like, I'm just trying to help you, let me just take this off of your hands. That is the only way to deal with these situations and not just cause a headache that ends in you screaming at your parents to, I don't know, get her fired or something.
And just as a question, how many of you would say that your coach, if you have an adult present, is difficult? Oh goodness. All right. So in that case, I would say what Mrs. Nealon said is very important. You've got to not at all be in an antagonistic relationship with them. So if they view you in a negative light, they're just going to make your life incredibly difficult. So try to just suck up to them and try to do, like I would do things, honestly, I would like, when you go back to see them, get them a Starbucks gift card, write them a nice thank you note, offer to take them to dinner or have your parents invite them over to your house. Like do a lot of things that you might not want to do that will get them to like you or want to do things for you, because people are willing to reciprocate when someone else does something for them, but if they view you as someone just making demands on them, they're not going to want to help you.
I actually have a friend who had a younger sibling in debate, and the debate was very, very difficult. And they called me and asked me for advice on the situation. And my advice was everything that Mr. Herzig said, and if the parents can act like they can stomach this person, which can be difficult. Your parents probably, if you think that the person is difficult, your parents probably also agree with that opinion, right? Or that assessment of the situation. But if that coach feels like your parent is an ally, even if it's not completely true, like your parents go home and at the dinner table they talk about how much they can't stand that person. If y'all can just fake it for a while, it will make the situation better.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move to the next part, which is staying up to date. A couple things you just need to be aware of. I'm sure some of you are. The first thing is the topic release dates. When do the topics come out? On August 15th, not at midnight, but at around 8:30 Eastern Standard Time, 8:30 to 9 a.m., which would be like 7:30 to 8 a.m., you will get the September, October topic. We'll show you where you can find this information later. October 1st, November, December. December 1st, Jan, Feb. February 1st is the March, April, which is the TFA, for those of you debating there. And May 1st is the NSDA Nationals topic. And usually sometime around April 1st, I don't know how many of you do this, but the NCFL Nationals topic comes out then. So, does anyone know where you find that information? Seeing none. You find it online at this website, which is speechanddebate.org. And if we go there, I'll show you exactly where to look. Speechanddebate.org. This is the National Speech and Debate Association's website. So it's going to look like this one right here. And you're going to scroll down all the way to this area here. And you are going to click on current topics under quick links. And then it shows you the voting process, and it shows you the topic, whatever it is. So this was the NSDA Nationals topic. Whatever the topic is, when you want to get it, this is where you get it. In addition to that, couple other websites that you should look at for updates would be NSD Update. I'm sure some of you have been there before. You could look at victorybriefs.com. And NSD and VBI also have Facebook pages. So you may want to like their Facebook pages.
Mr. Hickman, I think NSDupdated.com.
Oh. It's a .com?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, so if you go to those sites, they'll tell you a couple of important things. One is the topic, the other is results of recent tournaments, which is good for you to know so that you know which debaters are doing well, you know which judges are voting for them, and that sort of information that you want to keep in mind. So, let's talk about team materials and things that you should be doing as a team. The big thing I would say is you need a uniform method of communication. So, are you going to use a group chat on Facebook? Are you going to use email, which I would recommend if there are adults involved? Are you going to use, I don't know, some other means? You need to have that because people need to know how they can find out what's going on the team. The second thing is you need a practice schedule. You need to do practices, I would say, every day the week of a tournament. What are you going to do? And we'll talk about like what to do if your coach doesn't like that. But what are you going to do at those practices? You need to have at least one round. You need to have some kind of formal prep session where you do things like cut answers to common arguments, or maybe you discuss how to extend your cases, or whatever it is you're going to do. It has to be sort of formal prep. And you need to have some kind of speaking drill. So usually when our team does practices, they are 2.5 to 3 hours. And while that sounds like a lot, and it is a lot if you do it every day the week of the tournament, when you get to that tournament, if you've done all those things, you're going to be in a position to be successful. If you don't do those things, or if you only do them like one time, it's not going to be helpful for you. It's really important that you not just do the prep part, because that's one thing I see a lot, certainly like on the national circuit, is people who spend all their time writing cases and cutting evidence, but don't actually do rounds or don't do drills. And I was shocked when I found out just sort of the number of teams that were out there that weren't doing those things. And what I can tell you is you could have a phenomenal AC, but if you can't execute it in rounds, it's not going to matter that much. So you need practice actually implementing those things in rounds.
Absolutely. The one thing I find helpful when you're talking about practice, especially if you're the one who's sort of spearheading the practice schedule, is if you can come up with a formula, whatever it is. If people know when they go to practice, the following things are going to happen, it makes it easier for them to come, first of all, because some people are just going to have an aversion to, oh yeah, let me give up 3 hours on a school night. That sounds like fun, right? And they're also going to, newer members are going to feel uncomfortable. If they don't know what's going to happen at practice, they're less likely to go because they're like, oh my gosh, they're just going to judge me, right? So if you say, every time we start practice off with a brief speaking drill just to warm us up, and then we usually move into topical prep. We do a lot of blocks, we do this, we do that, and then we usually have some sort of practical drill, like a rebuttal redo or something. Even though that doesn't sound like I gave you a lot of information, if you can remember when you were a novice, that at least gives you some idea of, I have a chance to feel comfortable with these people before they're going to ask me to just get up and speak cold, right?
Yeah, and with that, I know some of you said that your coach doesn't necessarily want you to do those things. I would say first try to convince them that these are good things that will actually make you successful. If they still say no, you've got to move to plan B, which is, like I said earlier, going off campus.
They don't want them to have this.
Apparently, some of them don't.
Oh my goodness.
So, if you have to go off campus, I would say, so like your number one thing should be try to do practice at school. It's just infinitely easier than doing it anywhere else. But if it's off campus, use either a public, or not, yeah, use a library with group study rooms. That's what we do sometimes. Or use someone's house if they'll let you. Because doing it anywhere else, like trying to do practice at a Starbucks, which we've certainly tried to do, or doing it like in a restaurant, not so good. I'm remembering certain people like extending arguments at the top of their lungs while
Yeah.
other people are ordering their frappuccinos.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
It's an interesting thing. Although Alex and I have been known to hit up the Starbucks for a practice. There's one right across the street from where he goes to school, very close to my house.
The other thing is, I don't know how many of you use Dropbox or have done it here at camp, but use Dropbox because this is the best place for storing team materials. And within your Dropbox, you should build up batch files of answers to common types of positions or frameworks. You should store store like old cases. So we have a whole folder that has sample cases, and that has cases from like everyone who's ever debated for our team. You also want to make sure that you include card cutting assignments. This is something that you're going to need to do if you're taking the lead on your team, which is formally assign a certain number of cards every day, or not every day, but like every week or 2 weeks on specific issues. The main thing that I want to say here is it can't just be you. It can't be like you do all the prep and everyone else is along for the ride. If other people aren't as good as you or as experienced as you, it's not like that important, but they need to have the same level of dedication as you have. And they need to want it as badly as you do. So if you're doing all the work for your team, it's not going to be useful for you. You got to get other people involved.
The biggest, and the thing that I would add to that is, the sooner, how many of you are on a team where y'all are a team, but like everyone kind of views each other as competition? Okay.
Oh, rough.
The sooner you can get rid of that mentality, you will do better in debate. All of you will do better in debate. I realize that it's going to be rough. I realize that there are like social relationships and habits that have been formed over time, and that breaking those down is going to be a little bit of a difficulty. You might have to be the bigger person in the situation, and I understand that sometimes that's frustrating because you don't think that you're the one who caused whatever the tension is to begin with. I understand all of this, but the problem is kids who only have themselves no longer succeed in debate. When I was in school, it was possible to only have yourself. There were kids who could do that. But kids who only have themselves nowadays don't do well. And the reason why is because the sheer number of things that you have to prepare for to be successful at a tournament is so great that you cannot physically, even if you did no schoolwork, which would make you ineligible to debate, and that would be problematic, but let's say that that was possible. Even if you did no schoolwork, you could not physically do all of the tournament prep by yourself. Couldn't happen.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter, like we were saying before, whether other people are less experienced or less good. You need to use them as resources. So this sounds terrible, but I'm just going to put it out there. If for no other reason than to boost your own success, sort of get over, all the tension that might be there on your team. The first thing is you need to start traditions. Doesn't matter what they are. Maybe it's, I don't know, like after a local tournament every weekend you go out to dinner with your team. Or maybe it's you like go bowling with them. Or maybe it's, I don't know, you do some other like fun activity. But the point is you gotta be around these people in a non-debate context. This is just basic psychology 101 that I'm gonna give you right now. People like their friends. And if you're a friend of someone on the team, they're going to help you more. What? So it's not going to, you got to like put aside whatever those issues are. I know there might be issues, but you can't, that can't be present because that will hurt all of you. Also, with that, I know this is going to be hard to do for some of you. Congratulate your teammates when they do well, even if they do better than you.
And this has
yeah.
to be a sincere attempt. It can't be like, oh, Ian, congratulations. And like, I walk off down the hall and ignore him for the rest of the day, right? More like, we're at the tournament, you got the award, and I'm like, Ian, I cannot believe how phenomenal you did this weekend. Can I take a picture of that award that you have so that you can send it to your parents, right? Like, can I be that person who takes your selfie for you?
Takes your selfie for you.
You also, with that, need to do things like start the season, since you're all going to be moving into a new season, on the right foot. Meaning, you should explicitly say things like, I know there's been some tension between us, but I'd really like to help repair our relationship this year. Now, if you do that, they're going to be like, I don't know what's wrong with this person. But if you continue being nice to them, then they'll start to be nice to you because they'll be like, okay, that's all in the past, maybe. Or maybe they won't be. Maybe they'll still be like super nasty to you. No matter how mean they are or how obnoxious they are, you need to be nice to them. I know this is very difficult to do, but you have to do it. Yes?
I have a question about, like, teaching the novices.
Sure.
A lot of the novices, like, don't want to travel or don't want to travel to, so they just want to debate on our local circuit.
Yeah.
Or they just don't want to pay the money to travel because our school pays maybe the entry fees, then you have to pay hotels and people's parents, someone helps. So travel is rough for them.
Okay.
So they want to do the local circuit a lot,
Sure.
but it's very, very, the local circuit is very, very, very lay. So it's all parents.
Sure.
So what do I teach them debate as it should be, or like tell them your impact is democracy and that you love America, so you'll actually win rounds in the local circuit.
I mean, I think, and I'm not sure what Ms. Nealon feels about this, I think that the key thing is what she said just a second ago, which is if they don't want to travel, then they're not hooked yet.
Okay.
So how do you hook them? You hook them by getting them to experience the reward. Here's some more little psychology for you. You need them to feel the reward that comes with getting a trophy, right? And if they're not getting trophies, then you gotta like build them up to that point. But if they feel that reward, they're gonna want to keep debating. We have 3, and this is actually a more male thing than female, I find in my experience. We have these 3 boys on our team who are just like obsessed with debate. Like can't stop thinking about it, like talk about it every single day. They're a little crazy. But they want to travel everywhere because they're totally addicted. And the thing is, it's just like any other type of addiction you might have. If you get a reward or a feeling of pleasure from it, you're going to want to do it more, right? So what you need to do with those people is get them, like maybe put them in easy tournaments so that they do well, and then be like, you want to keep winning, right? And try to get them to want to do more. If they don't do it, at a certain point, you gotta like move away from those people and move on to people who do want it.
The other thing is, so it is certainly true, just like every good song, you gotta have a hook. So
That's really good.
you need to figure out a way to get these people to understand why they should be passionate about debate. And if they're not passionate about debate, it's kind of time to cut debate and move on.
Yep.
But in addition to that, I don't, Zelgai, I'm not picking on you, but I don't like the dichotomy of debate as it should be and debate on the local circuit.
Yeah.
I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but debate on the local Dallas circuit used to be the best local debate in the country, and anyone can argue with me on that, and I will tell you why you're wrong. But when I was in high school, I would say debate on the Dallas local circuit was the best local debate in the country. The reason why is because everyone went to tournaments every weekend, and we have lots of private schools in Dallas who are traditionally successful. We also have quite a few public schools in Dallas that are traditionally successful. And they would all bring their kids every weekend. And so if you were a little novice, it was intimidating, but you were going to get beat up by kids that were going to the TOC every single weekend. And it developed this local circuit that was thriving. And when local service, and I think that our local circuit in Dallas is not that, because a lot of the schools have just decided once you qualify for state, we're not going to take you to things anymore. I think that only hurts everyone. And so when you have a local circuit that is sort of debate impoverished, right, like that, it's just not thriving. You've got to do things to make that circuit thrive. Arguments get popular because they win. And if you think that the only arguments that are capable of winning are like, I love democracy in America, it's because you haven't found a way to present your ideas in a way that's palatable to more people. That's not the fault of the judges, that's your fault, right? And if you can take the arguments that we've taught you at camp and learn how to apply them to people who've never seen debate before, you will not only be more successful on your local circuit, you will not only start to make your local circuit thrive because now y'all are actually arguing, but you will become more successful at national tournaments, because at national tournaments, there are still people who have very little debate experience who are going to be in the back of the room judging.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I would just say with that, the last time that a debater won both the TOC and NCFL Nationals was 25 years ago. I don't know if you guys have any idea what NCFL is like, but many people consider it the I love America, I love democracy of tournaments. For those of you in Texas, it's sort of the national equivalent of UIL, okay? What Danny did this year was exactly what Mrs. Nealon just described. He made arguments that were good, but he packaged them in a way that would be, that would make judges who wanted to hear I love America feel good about the argument. So he didn't make those arguments, but he definitely used like catchphrases. He like gave an example for every argument. He had really nice packaging for all the speeches. He had opening quotes. So he was still making very sophisticated arguments, but making them in a way that would appeal to those judges who were coming out of the cornfields. So that's what you've got to do. It's about packaging. It's not about the argument itself. We're running out of time, so I just want to talk about one other thing. Last year we actually were given 2 different like time slots for this election, which is why it's like twice as long as what we're getting to right now. But I just want to talk about the goal setting part, which is under this part over here. This also goes to your question, I think, Zelgai. So one thing that you've got to do with your team is make them set both competitive and non-competitive, realistic goals for the year. This can be a great way to get kids to stay motivated in debate. You need to make them, especially if they're kids who know anything about the national circuit, and this is good for you as well, make them write down 3 to 5 things they want to accomplish by the end of the year and or the end of their debate careers. So I've had debaters say, I would like to win an Octa's Bid tournament, if that's where they are, right? If they've been like doing well at Octa's Bid tournaments, that would be a realistic goal. I've had kids say, I would like to consistently clear at tournaments this year, if they've been like in that 4-2, 3-2 area, but they haven't actually been in elimination rounds. I've had kids say, I would like to have a winning record at tournaments this year if they've been in the like 2-3 zone, right? Or 2-4 zone. So whatever you think is a step up from where you are right now, that's a realistic goal, right? So it shouldn't be like kids who lose all the time being like, I want to win the TOC, right? It should be based on where they are. But what you want to do when you set those goals is then have them write down 3 to 5 concrete and measurable steps they will take to meet those goals. So for example, I would say something like, I would like to qualify for state this year. That's my goal, right? Or that's one of my goals. And so then I'm going to say things like, do 5 rebuttal drills a day. Attend at least 3 practices a week. Do speed drills for 10 to 15 minutes per day, whatever, right? Those are concrete, specific steps that I'm writing down, and this is the most important thing. You need to write down and have the other people on your team write down not just the goal, but also the steps that they're going to take to meet those goals, and have them check off the steps as they do them. If you do that, I guarantee that you're going to be likelier to meet the goal than if you just think it in your head and you don't write it down. Because if you write it down, you are now committing to that thing. This is the thing that I want to make happen. That is the biggest motivator, because I can't tell you how many times I, as a coach, this past year was like, ugh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to take this 50-page case and cut it down, which I had to do many times. Or I don't want to hear this rebuttal redo that I've just heard for the last 2 hours. Or I don't want to go to the library instead of going to Mexico on my April vacation. Or, you know, I could keep going. But the thing that got me to do those things was thinking this could help achieve X goal, right? So the goal has to be the motivating thing for your team and for you.
There are 2 things I want to add to that. So what Mr. Hertzig has just given you is actually a strategy used in a lot of aspects in your life. If you ever work at a corporation, this will be one of the ways that they try to develop you. But there are 2 things that I've learned in my professional experience that are helpful about what he has just said. First of all, in addition to writing them down and checking off the steps, it's important that you check in with yourself every once in a while to assess your progress towards the goal. This should actually be done in like almost like a journal fashion, if that makes sense to you. Like you should write down, you know, it's been a month and I've seen the following improvements. And then you should take whatever you have written and you should go to an accountability buddy. Someone who has also been working towards a goal, and y'all should talk about the progress that you have seen in yourself and in each other. And the reason why you need someone else's perspective on the issue, I know that might sound crazy to you, you think you've got it all down yourself. The reason why you need someone else is to confirm that your perception of yourself is actually correct. You might not have an accurate, like you might think, I got so good at 1ARs, don't have to do that anymore, right? And then you ask a teammate to watch your round, and they're like, that 1AR wasn't so hot. It's kind of where you lost the round. But you thought you were so great at 1ARs that that wasn't even a skill that you were considering working on anymore. Someone else's input is going to be more honest than the input that you give yourself. So you want to make sure that you've got an accurate picture of what your weaknesses and strengths are, which involves putting someone else in the conversation. This is also another strategy for making your teammates like you and becoming a team. If you are constantly being vulnerable and saying, hey, Kayla, you watched my round yesterday? I was just wondering if you had any feedback about what I could do better, right? Kayla now, I asked her a question in a way that she is going to give me feedback even if she doesn't really want to, because she's going to look really bad if she doesn't like say anything, right? But in addition to that, I become the vulnerable one, right? I'm the one who's looking And if there's any way to repair a relationship, it is to make yourself be the vulnerable one.
Absolutely. And just to add one thing to that, I think everything Mrs. Nealon said is totally spot on. I just say one other little piece of psychology to take with you for life, which is people actually like being asked to do favors. I know that sounds bizarre, but people like it when you ask them to do something for you. The reason they like it, especially if it's like, what's your opinion, can I get your advice? The reason they like that is it validates them. It makes them feel like you have something, they have something to offer you, right? So this is something you should use for your coach, your parents, your teammates. Ask them to do things for you, and it will pay off. We have to end here, but if you have other questions, please seek us out later on. We have a whole other section of this that unfortunately we didn't have time for here, but we also have some notes that are written out that we can send you if you want this. All right, have a lovely day.
Person.